Hello, game changers. My name is Trina Sunday from Reimagine HR, and welcome to our session where we are going to talk all things strategy. I've got a lot of clients that have been talking to me lately around having some difficulty building some strategy, getting traction for strategy, building strategic documents that sit on shelves and don't do anything unless we hit people around the head with them. It just doesn't work, right? So I thought, let's have a conversation. And from my perspective, who better to have that chat with than Alicia McKay? So Alicia is about all things leadership and strategy. She's about cutting through the bullshit of business. She's authored a couple of amazing books in that space, is part of a much loved, from my perspective, anti-qualification camp in terms of how we can bring real-time conversations, real learning, things that we can practically actually do to make things better for ourselves, better for our teams, and better for our organization. So super excited to have Alicia here with me, and we'll bring her in now so we can get talking about connecting our strategy, leadership, culture, so we can make great things happen. So welcome, Alicia. It's great to have you here.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice to be here. And I was just thinking as you're doing your introduction, like, I know that's what we're talking about, but also I get this kind of like allergic shiver when we go, we're going to talk about all things HR, leadership, people, strategy, culture, change, agile, transformation, buzzword. And I'm like,
in 60 minutes. There are a lot of buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
And it's part of the problem. Like, we've got buzzwords on buzzwords, which then means the work we're doing and what we're driving doesn't always land with the people that we need it to land with.
No, and I think that's kind of it. Like, there's a language piece in here where it's like, I'll say, even me saying that, a language piece. Like, if you're talking to a subject matter expert or someone in your team, totally talk about having a framework for emotional intelligence within your senior leadership. Totally say that.
Yeah.
If you're talking to mid-tier managers or team leads and you want to talk about something that's going to make their life better, please don't talk like that. Like, tell them that you want to help them to be better at their jobs, or that you would like to point everyone in the same direction, or what, don't talk to them about strategy and culture. They don't even know what they are. In fact, to be fair, a lot of the people who talk about those things don't even know what they are.
And that's probably one of the things which is a good place to start, actually. How do you talk about strategy with people in a way that's not BS buzzwords? Talk to me about strategy.
And honestly, it's even kind of hard. So, like, I feel like a bit of a hypocrite a lot of the time, because I'm all, oh yeah, no buzzwords, no bullshit. But, then I go to talk about strategy and I'm like, so what's your objective? But, my kind of base explanation is always that strategy is always about change. Mm-hmm. So you don't need a strategy if you want to stay the same. Nobody has a staying the same strategy. Everybody has a strategy when they're in one place and they would like to be somewhere else. Yeah. So strategy is your vehicle for figuring out how you get from where you are now to where you want to be. But what is often misinterpreted in that kind of environment is that people think that equates to a plan.
Yes.
And so when you say, how are we going to get from here to 2 times growth? They go, we could hire more analysts, we could reach new markets, and you got to stop. That's a plan. Like, the steps you could take. Strategy is about zooming out and going, what are we all about and where do we want to be? Cool, that's our why, got that sussed. And you can sub in vision, mission, purpose, values, like you can sub in a lot there, but the essence of that is, it's your why. And then working out how you're going to do it, not what you're going to do, which is money that you want to spend, plans that you're going to make, initiatives you're going to run, products and services you're going to launch, but what your approach is to moving forward. So maybe that's a customer first approach, and you're deciding that your strategic priority is to retain and deepen relationships with your existing customers. What's really cool about that is if you land on that as an approach, that makes your what really easy. You can go, okay, well, if that's what we're doing, here's where our marketing spend goes, here's the kind of people we hire, like, here's what we do. Yeah. Because we've made that cool. But if instead you decide, actually, what we need to do is diversify, like, we've been stuck in the same lane for too long and it's getting old, we need to refresh who we are to our market and actually get out of this space. We hate it. Well, that's a whole nother strategy that requires a completely different set of actions. And so the guts of strategy is, do you have something you care about enough to want to change? And then have you cut off a bunch of options to focus in on how you're going to get there? And then the other stuff just mostly takes care of itself. It's the clarity of those two steps that's usually missing.
Yeah. How, in your experience, so, because I think there is a lot that, in what I see a lot is plans on plans.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I feel like a lot of strategy is actually operational planning, badly disguised. And I do think I've seen quite a lot of strategy for status quo, by the way, to pick up some, where I think there's some self-protection in some organizations where, no, it's really convenient for us to write a strategy that we know we're already smashing so that we don't get attention from the board. Or so there's some elements of that, which is where culture can sometimes come in. But how do you often work with teams to get them to zoom out? How are we zooming out?
Like, I want to pick up on the point you've made there about strategy or the world that it lives in being used as a stick to beat people with, because if you've got a performance framework or a way to track progress against your goals, which is perverted and actually used as a disincentive for people, then that's really problematic. Like, if you're doing an annual plan and you're like, here's what we want to do, we want to like double our revenue and we want to reach new markets and we want to hire new people and do all this new stuff. And then you use those goals as a way to punish your leadership team as a board, or to not give you staff bonuses if you're the leaders, then of course people are going to create you boring, risk-averse
ones, right?
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, you can't do that. And if you are wondering...
Can't do that, everyone.
You can't do it. Like, there you go. You heard it first, you can't do it. So in my experience, every leadership team or board that I work with that tells me with their mouth, we need people to take more risks. People here are too risk averse. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is, A, you're actually risk averse. And every time they put their head above the parapet, you knock them down.
Yeah.
And B, there's no incentive for them to do anything new.
Yeah.
So that's your job, to create the environment where they want to take risks and they feel safe doing it.
Yeah. And that's where I feel like you can't talk about strategy without leadership coming up, right? And without culture coming up, because it's kind of, if you do have a risk adverse culture, or you have a blame culture, avoidant, that fear and insecurity to make decisions, to make bold moves, then there's not going to be a strategy that inspires anybody.
Oh, 100. And it starts at the top, right? So I had an example recently, which I thought was quite good, which is a bit of a lane change, but makes the point, where in rural Victoria, when everyone in rural Victoria was in lockdown, a large government agency that deals with those places, unnamed, was trying to make a relief fit to support their people who were stuck at home. They're all in ISO. They can't get into the town to get what they need. And they're like, shit, this is no good. And so they sent out a really thoughtful email around wellbeing. And they said, look, here's a memo, and we just need you to know that work is not your priority right now. And if you have to be with your family and look after your own physical and mental health, that's what matters most to us. Now, that's great. But that email was sent at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday.
Right.
So at that point, it doesn't matter what the email says, because there's no walking the talk from the top.
Yeah. And that's the thing about boundaries, right? It's that, leaders that will say, I don't expect that you're going to put in the hours that I'm putting in, and that martyrdom that comes through, and it's like, come on, mate. Like, if, it's the symbolism of it when you've got people that are wearing that badge of honor in terms of the hours that they're doing or what's happening. Oh, I'm so tired. I had to work right through last night to get this strategy into the board, or
and so what you're saying is, hey, if you're like a pleb like you don't have to. But if you want to be at the top like me, if you want to succeed in this place, this is what it takes. That's what you're saying with your behavior. And if you have done a good job of hiring ambitious staff that really give a shit, which hopefully you have, well, they're going to take that on board and go, okay, well, I want to be a leader, so I'm going to have to do that. And it's like, I tell my kids not to swear, and I swear.
How's that going?
And, not great. But the thing is, they don't swear in front of me. And here's an important point, I reckon, because I say to my kids, look, it's not okay for you to swear, but then I regularly swear. They may not swear in front of me, but make no mistake, they will be swearing.
Yeah.
And so
it's
as a
push to the underground, right? It's then what's visible versus what's invisible.
Bang on.
And I think that, true change is going to come from where we have transparency and visibility over where it is that we're going. And and who's coming along with us. Try not to say on the journey, because you know how
everyone's always taking people on journeys these days. And since COVID, not only are they on a journey, they've got roadmaps, they've got blueprints, they've got like, it's good, isn't it? But to come to your point around, okay, like how do you get people in the right headspace? It's actually not very complicated. We just make it really hard. And so there's kind of two important components of it. Like if we accept that the why and the how are the most important kind of strategic pillars, and that the what comes after that, well, getting people tapped into the why and pulling them out of their own headspace is just asking them really important questions like, why do you actually care about this work? And what is the work that how does what we do make other people's lives better? Tell me about that. Yeah. Right. And so it's all of a sudden going, instead of focusing like right now on what's in front of you and what's in your email, go and look, like just put your head out the window and think about how you're affecting your customers and your audience and, you know, your community. So that's the first one. And then the second one is to push out horizon. So if we're talking why still, is to push out horizon. So we're not good at thinking about 10 or 20 years in the future. And one of my favorite things to do is a technique that was pioneered by Cameron Herold, and it's called vivid vision. Okay. And I have people write me a story. It's so cool. I have people write me a story, and it's set 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 years in the future. And I say, all right, I want you to write me a story. And right now it's April 2042, and you still work here. Can you believe it? I want you to right. I want you to write me a story about
I've seen the data.
What it's like for you to come to work in 2042. What do you see? What's the headline on the newspaper? Who's here? Like, what have you been doing? What does it smell like? What does it look like? Walk me through it. Write me a really cool story. And so people write these visionary stories where they're like, I send my hologram into our Asia office to connect with the innovation work. Yeah. And once you've done that and you've thrown your perspective that far out, it unlocks a piece of your brain that can see and feel it, because otherwise you can't connect to it.
Yeah.
And so we did that here recently, but it's 2027. We're like, it's 2027. Here's a letter I'm writing you guys from 2027. And holy crap, it's so great. Here's what my day looked like this morning. Yeah. And it's so good, right? And so that's awesome. It's how you get your why. Now, your how stuff is generally about alignment. So you don't need most of your team to figure out what your strategy is in terms of the approach. That's a trade-off conversation that's had between your executive and your board. That's fine. They make a recommendation, the board decides, you move on. What lets people down is that they don't line up the way they work with what they say they care about. And so it might be that you are an education provider who doesn't fund professional development for your staff in times of financial constraint.
Yep.
If you don't line up what you do with what you say you do, it doesn't work. It might be that you're a wellbeing company that doesn't provide any mental health support for your staff. It might be that you have an organisational value around making work easy or making people's lives easy, but your procurement system is so frustrating that your suppliers can't get paid and half your payroll's messed up. Right? And those things, those engine room pieces are what drives the day-to-day reality of a strategic vision.
And that's what drives the storytelling, right? That then brings strategy to life and makes it something other than a strategy. And it is around that, you know, how from my perspective and with the HR game changers that I'm working with that are trying to really level up in terms of what they're doing. And that's where most people that are joining us here today will be, you know, it's not because you're shit at strategy. It's because people have an appetite for leveling up, you know, like we're wanting to look at things from different perspectives. And I think some of it, it's that, without wanting to use the word philosophy, but it's knowing the core of that care factor and knowing what that relationship looks like that then translates in the space I work in with employees. But that then directly then flows through to customer, you know, relationships, customer experiences, you know, and in turn kind of the business success type stuff.
Oh, 100%. Like I've always thought that internal or support functions, which I hate the words of, but let's roll with it.
I loved that in your LinkedIn where you had the bomb emoji.
So anyone missed that? They're the engine room of strategy. So the misperception often with strategy is that like it's done in the leadership room and then it's up to frontline staff to make it happen. But actually, the enablers that build the systems and create the conditions for whether or not we can and do work that way, they sit in HR, finance, policy, procurement, legal, customer services. That's where we actually either make it possible to go in the right direction or we don't. And when we leave people out of those conversations, what we get is situations where, okay, so I've got a newly established business unit at Auckland Council about 5 or 7 years ago, and they're called the Community Empowerment Unit. And their job, now that the council has amalgamated, is rather than directly delivering community services, they want to create a centre of excellence and empower communities to deliver their own locally focused, tailored services. Cool strategy, right? Yeah. So they've got a great strategy and a very clear vision and very clear way that they're going to deliver on that as a unit. 18 months in, I get an email saying, I need you to come and facilitate a session with our team. I think we need to refresh our strategy because we're just not getting the results we expected. Our KPIs are terrible. I'm like, okay, all right. So I come in. Now, before I even get into the session with these leaders, I had to register as a supplier with Auckland Council.
Yep.
Right. So here we go. Now, in order to be a community service provider with your community empowerment lead, you need to register as a supplier also, whether you're running a yoga class at a community hall or a youth safety group who needs to claim expenses back for the supplies that you've ordered, whatever, you've got to register as a supplier with Auckland Council. Now, having been through that process, even though it is needlessly complicated, but let's not go there, the first section where you have to fill in your details has a thing in it that we upload proof of your $2 million in professional indemnity and public liability insurance.
Yep. Cover your ass first. Yep.
Now, how many yoga classes at Pukekohe Community Hall do you think have $2 million in PI and PL insurance? None. So at the very first hurdle, it's knocked out. Now, if you went and talked to finance, who operate in a completely different part of the organisation, and you went, what's this about? They would say, excuse me, Alicia McKay, this is a best practice finance and procurement system. It mitigates as much risk as is possible. And we've actually done a presentation about this at the Finance Dudes conference where everybody lauded us for how amazing our procurement system was. And you know what? They're right.
Yep.
However, the measure of whether or not it's good is whether it contributes to the goals, not whether it's best practice. And so actually, because the finance system was so best practice, it was making it impossible for the organisation to actually achieve its goals, which was to connect with the community and get it happening. And so when we kind of get that wrong, whether it's HR or finance or legal or policy, the whole thing falls over. There's no such thing as strategic change.
Yeah.
Because the system enablers didn't enable.
Yeah. And that's when I loved it when we had a quick chat not long ago and you said, you know, best practice can't happen in a vacuum. And I'm like, yes, because some of the work that I'm doing in that HR space is, you know, that there's a lot of best practice we look at. There's a lot where you're looking at what's happening globally, you're trending stuff out, you're reading phenomenal amounts of stuff. And then you try and sift through all of it and you go, okay, well, 85% of that's not relevant to me, my industry, my market. Yeah. Let's take the other 15% and then look at what enablers, what appetite there is to kind of explore it. You know, have I got what's needed in place from a leadership perspective and all that to try and make things happen? And then you kind of end up with, you know, you're driving something in this message around best practice and it's like, but it doesn't work if it doesn't align and fit with all the other puzzle pieces.
So best fit. We don't want to aim for best practice. We want to aim for best fit. So from a systems view, how do we fit in with all of the other parts of this in a way that, to use kind of an architect terminology, is building a better house, not creating better rooms, right? Which is that classic silo thing. And so if we're thinking best fit, rather than going, what's best practice for employee wellbeing right now in the pandemic and reading journal articles and going to conferences, you know what you'd do? You'd ask your staff and then you'd listen.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen, this is a very cynical point of view, but we do these engagement surveys and we send out these things and we go, how do you feel about your job? Do you like it? Are you working hard? Blah, blah, blah. And the results come in and they're not good. They're never good. Yeah. And HR goes, the thing is, this was just after the announcement that we'd made about the realignment and people were stressed because we'd just introduced the new CRM. So we can't really
we argue it away, right?
Yeah. And then we put it away. And it's like, what if instead of doing those to argue with them, we did them to listen, and we went out to our staff and we're like, tough times with COVID, what would be helpful? And it might be that the last thing they want to do is dial into an online fucking yoga class or 5 p.m. drink. But if you sent them a meal kit, all of them a meal kit once a week, and they didn't have to cook dinner for their family after a pressing week in ISO, that would change their lives.
I would have thanked you for that coming out of ISO yesterday.
Yeah,
I'm having COVID. So yeah, apologies for the but I think that's at the core of it, right? Because I think, and I know in the space that I work in, so I call employee engagement surveys like the happiness index. Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, and a lot of the time people are busting out 90% scores. It's like, okay, so if we're going to go from 90, I probably don't believe the diagnostics or the measures that we're using. If we push the needle to 92, 93 or 94, which is the KPI that's been set to measure that, is that actually going to translate to any phenomenal kind of impact on the ground? And most of the time it's no, right? And then the other structured place where we get feedback's performance appraisal. Don't get me started on that. That's a whole nother chat. Whole nother chat where I can tangent very quickly. So we won't go there. But a lot of organizations are using that as the structured mechanisms for getting feedback. And it just doesn't work, right? Like, it is about conversations. The challenge for people that I'm working with is a lot of the time is resourcing for that, and not to use it as an excuse, but there's lots of support functions who have been leaned up so much, right?
Yeah.
Carved up, leaned up, decimated, financially due to constraints or whatever through pandemic, bad business, changes are made. We stripped the L&D budget. We cut out all of the training support, all that kind of stuff, wellbeing, can't afford it. But it's like, how do you then make sure you've got the reach on the ground? And the challenge I have is, well, it shouldn't be HR's job.
Yeah.
That's a part of the problem if we're enabling codependency. But it's then around, how do we have managers believe in it? Yeah. That these are conversations that can be coming organically from them with their people. And all we've got to do is weave in a question into a chat that you're already having. And that to me is a sign of a lot of the time that doesn't get traction because the culture's not that.
So I reckon, given we're talking about HR, this is a what's your job conversation. So totally get it. Everybody stretch for time. But what is your job? Is your job to respond to lots of forms that have been filled in, that have come into your email? Or is your job to create an environment where people grow and feel good at work? And if you decide that your job is to do that, well, that will change how you prioritize what you spend your time doing. And from a leadership point of view, what's your job? Is your job to do finance or customer service, or is your job to enable the success of your business through people, which I think it is? And if that's your job, then you're spending your time asking questions of people like, do you know how you fit in? Do you know where we're going? And more importantly, what's making it hard for you to do that?
Yeah. And listening to the answer, right? So when people say, no, I don't understand how my contributions fit and make a difference. All right. Thanks for that feedback. Exit stage left. It's like, I see that happen. And then you just go, there's wonderful opportunities to really make a difference and shift things from a leadership perspective. But that is such a what's your job thing to me, because I'm like, as a leader, your number one job is to know where the direction is and to make it easy for other people to connect with that. Like, that's your first job. And so I get all like wound up, but like Crown Law is a good example. So government legal services in New Zealand, wound up. I'm doing their org strategy with them, and to their credit, as part of their process, which was awesome, by the way, they had me go and run some workshops with their kind of like middle tier to be like, what do you think about this? This is where we look like we're going. Are you going to be able to do that? What would that mean for you in your job? Like, what would be hard about that? What would we have to change? And it's great chat, because they're like, okay, well, you can talk about thought leadership, but currently we have a billing utilization rate that would have to change. We'd have to change the way we fund things, or our people can't do this. And we're like, yeah, awesome. So this is all system stuff, right? Yeah. But I have all these internal functions come in, and they're like, Alicia, it's not like, we're not lawyers. So if you're going to talk about, creating social good and, providing thought leadership for the legal community, we can't do that.
because we're IT and libraries. And at this point, I pretty much like throw my whiteboard marker on the ground and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm like, these people want to be thought leaders and out there telling the lawyers how to do their job. How the fuck are they going to do that if they can't access previous case files in a logical way and they haven't got support to prepare and disseminate materials? Yeah. And IT doesn't let them do it. Like, are you kidding me? You guys are the most important part. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'm thinking, shouldn't be me telling you this. It should be your leaders who are going, you guys are so critical in your piece to how this place works. And I want to make it easy for you to be great. So tell me, what's making it hard? And the stupid thing about that is, especially when I go in and run in Crown Law, they're awesome, actually. They're like teachers' pet students out of some of the places I've worked with. But people want me to run them so they get feedback that's not, people feel comfortable expressing feedback that isn't career limiting. But every time I go and run them, and to be fair, people are a bit more like brash with me and honest with me. And they're like, oh, that's stupid. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. But
tell me more.
They've told everybody this more than once. They've filled in an engagement survey where they've gone, we can't even share a cost code. What do you mean collaboration? Where they've said, our job description or our salary bands make it impossible for us to do what you want us to do, where we've said, we can't have the agile workforce you've put on the poster because our current recruitment procedure is so lengthy and needs so many approvals that I can't act fast enough to get good talent and I can't offer them $5,000 more because it's out of my delegations. Like, they have told you this, but you didn't listen.
Yeah. And I think it's frustrating as an external person where you can see from the internal support functions perspective where they're like, I've said this 50 million times. And then you come in as the external person, you say the exact same thing and an exec team listens to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so I'm really careful around saying, this is what your team have been telling you. This is what, like, now's the time to listen. But you watch physically support function and we need to stop saying that. But, these kind of,
what about like enablement wizards or like the people that actually make it possible for you to be fucking awesome? Like, what would you like to use it instead?
I don't know. If anyone's got some suggestions for that, we'd love to hear it, along with whacking your questions below this live stream so we can have a look. But I think that, it is about enablement, right? And I think it's the same for that leadership piece where it's not about leadership development programs and all this kind of crap a lot of the time of forcing people into a room where 80% of people in the room don't feel like they need to be there because it's come from a leadership competency framework that's been built. And then we're going to force everyone through this funnel. But it's that manager enablement bit as well, where it's then like, because I do think, to your point around this is leaders' number one job, right? I probably work with a lot of leaders that would not acknowledge that that's the number one part of their job. In terms of,
because probably no one's told them and supported them in that is their job. No one's gone, like, when they got the last promotion, so they were like the best accountant in town, and then they were the team leader of the accountants, and then they were the finance manager, and now they're the CFO, and no one at any point along that journey has stopped and said, hey, you don't need to know that much accounting now. Your job now is actually about enabling the future of your business through the people you lead. So can you just put 30% of your time there? No one has said that. So how could they possibly know?
It's like we onboard people when they come in as a grad, and then we don't give them any transition support when they move laterally upwards and anything in between. So it's like we leave people to fend for themselves and then miss all of that alignment, right? Because it is about alignment.
It's all about alignment, but alignment isn't straight up and down. So I like that you used the word enable before, because the model that we use in our business and that we're starting to try and use more broadly with clients is kind of this like 2x2 matrix, right? And so we're like, okay, what are the two kind of key variables that change what people do in our business? And so in ours, we've got, you either make things up or you make things happen as the vertical axis, and you're either backstage or on stage as our horizontal axis, right?
Yep.
And so what we end up with is, if you're me, you are on stage and you make things up. And so my job is to enlighten. It's to sense make and provide everyone else in my team something they can work with. Intellectual property, getting on stage, keynote speaking, bringing in clients. My job is to do the enlighten stuff, and that's my home. And I've got lots of different connections to different parts of the business, but that's my home. Now, if you're on stage, but your job is to make things happen, then you're the empower matrix. All right. You're in the empower quadrant. And so that's our facilitators and delivery staff and coaches who use what I made up and actually use that to empower people to change their lives.
Yeah.
Move along one quadrant and you've got backstage and make things happen. And that's our enabling quadrant. And so that's the operations and our HR and our, all this kind of back end stuff, which if that doesn't happen, nothing else works. Yep. And then the top quadrant is our elevate quadrant, which is where you make things up and you're backstage. So it's marketing, sales, production, video, design, that kind of stuff. Yep. So what we do when we have these conversations is we go, right, so there's no hierarchy here. What there is a web. There is a web of mutual reliance and accountability. And there are strings that run through each of these quadrants that connect us. And you rely on every part of this business. So nobody's better than anyone, including me, right? Yep. You rely on people for different things and you're accountable to them for different things. But if you don't stay in your zone enough, the whole system falls over.
Yep.
And so that zone chat that's just going from the very beginning, we're not giving you a role title that sits in a bloody structure, which is designed for silo. We're going, what's your piece of the puzzle and how are you so important in making it all work? And it's a completely different chat from, you're over there and you report to so-and-so and that feeds up through there in your KPIs about something that has nothing to do with our big objective, right?
I think it's part of the benefit because it's a phenomenal model, right? Because it's all built around interconnectedness.
Yeah. We start there. We start at connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the challenge with traditional large-scale organizations that we've built around hierarchy. We've built in systemically power structures.
We built silos. We draw them.
We draw them. Yeah. And because it's the same with, I was talking or looking at some content around, talking with a couple of people around circular leadership. So they're big organizations and they've moved to circle leadership where it's like, the team's enabled to make the decisions, do things. And, and I love that the parallel was drawn of, like if your team's not making decisions though, that as a leader that you don't agree with, and you don't let those through, then you haven't truly empowered your team. If you're building these kind of fake, innovative team management structures, but then you're wanting to sign off on everything or everything that's ever happened you've approved. Well, it's approval and you've still built decision-making hierarchy, and even though you're trying to build a different way of looking at it. But I think, because if you look at, when you talk about alignment and we talk about everything needing to be connected and we talk about not having best practice in a vacuum, how do you navigate so let's say HR are trying to drive some really phenomenal, cool stuff, right? They are on board. They've made the transition from HR strategy to people strategy, which, in my world, like there's quite a difference, and they're trying to do amazing things, but the other things that they need to connect to or the other areas they need to connect to are not thinking the same, not aligned, not connected. How do you cut through?
Well, if they've managed to develop a people strategy without talking to the other people that work there, then they're doing it wrong, would be the first thing I would say.
Yeah. And so I'd say they probably talk to them, but they don't have, I hate the term buy-in, but the reality is if people don't believe, they don't believe in what you're doing.
Yeah. And they and they can't, right? And so they actually can't. And there's a conversation that needs to be had, I think, within teams, whether it's within HR or within IT or within policy, that goes, you are holding on to a vision of the future that nobody else knows about that yet, and you hold it in your hands because everyone is walking around at work, banging into others, frustrated that no one else can see how important the thing they know the most about is, while maintaining a simultaneous ignorance about everybody else's piece of the puzzle. And so I learned a new word 2 days ago. A workshop participant gave it to me and I love it. And it's Sonder, S-O-N-D-E-R. And it's the realization that everybody else's inner lives are just as vivid and complex as your own. And I reckon we need more of that at work because what happens is your HR people are going, oh my God, these backwards idiots. Why can't they see how important it is to do leadership development? And the engineers are going, fucking HR. It's all very well for them to worry about leadership development, but if we don't maintain this asset by the end of the month, we are out $2 billion. I can't even talk to them, right? So it's this chat. And so this is going to sound really dumb, but the most useful exercise I've done with teams who are really who feel like they're trying to drag other people along and they can't. There are two things I do actually. One of them is to get a bunch of representatives in a room, whether it's like an ELT or whatever. And I have to draw a tree. Now, this sounds really dumb. And I did this in ISO.
Wait, this talk me through it.
I did this in ISO at one point, and while they were drawing their tree, I like wandered through to grab a coffee in the kitchen, and my partner Cam was in the kitchen, and he's like, "Aren't you supposed to be in a workshop?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, they're drawing a tree, so I thought I'd make a coffee." And he's like, "Are they paying you for this?" I'm like, "Yeah, mate." But I got this idea from Mark Trulson, who does amazing work in the OD space. He's an absolute machine. He's based in Victoria. Love Mark Trulson. But essentially, you draw a tree, and you're like, "All right, I've got the base of my tree, right? And the base of my tree is what's the overarching goal or strategy of the place we work, right?" And so if you're an FMCG company, FCMG, sorry, it might be, like feed Australians. And so you're like, okay, it's to feed Australians, Australian food, right? That's our big picture. Cool. But then off our kind of main big old trunk, you've got these like arterial branches, big fat ones. And you're like, okay, this is distribution and manufacturing. This is online and e-commerce. This is product design and development. You've got these kind of big ones. And each of these big branches has their own line, right? Which is like, okay, we're all connected to the idea of feeding Australians Australian food.
Yep.
But our way of doing that is to make it easy for people to buy it, right? Or to get it into their house quickly after they order it, or whatever these big pieces are.
Yep.
You've got these wee branches that come off the fat ones. That's like, and my team is the brand team. And while it might be easy for the brand team to say they feed Australians, actually we do, because we reach Australians so that they connect with us so that we can feed them. Cool. And then this can go on for a while. We get like a wee twig and you're like, and this is my purpose, which is all about like from bricks to clicks. And here's a nest on the end, and that's whatever. So you can kind of do whatever you like. What's fun about this exercise is that like I can't draw trees for shit, as you can tell. And some people think something that looks like this, which is like that's not a tree.
We're not just people, your tree drawing skills.
Yeah, other people become these like artistic people where they're like, actually, you'll see I've drawn roots, and the roots signify the foundation. And there's really an ecosystem, and they go ham with it, and it's really cool. But the point of the exercise is that after everyone's done their trees and they come together and share them, and everyone has a good giggle about how shit we are at drawing trees, you start to get this kind of, yeah, right. And this is how it all fits together. And I never really understood what these bloody agile coaches were. But now that I see it on the tree, and so you create this like collective tree, and people are like, that's pretty cool. And so it's actually, and I don't care if you draw a tree or a web or what you do, but the point is, have you provided a way for people to understand how everything else works rather than staying in their own box? Because they can't know on purpose. And doing a thing where every team does a presentation at a stand-up and talks about what's been going on for them, everybody hates that shit. That's not fun. Like, that's not direct. It's not a conversation. That's a lecture. It needs to be in conversation. So that's one thing I do. The second thing I do that is absolutely amazing is I do role plays for people, because what's really hard to do is to change your opinion without looking dumb. It's just hard. We don't make it easy. And so instead, you just do a fun thing where you're like, okay, you're the customer service person today, and you're a customer today, and you're the boss today, and you're the chairman. All right. Tell me what's going on for you. And everyone has a laugh. Again, this is a consistent feature.
Awkward.
And they're like, actually, as a customer, I hate this because I can't click on the thing I need and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, And just spending that, 15 minutes pretending to be someone else was enough. They needed to snap them out of their own silo, because actually the way we work, as you've said with the structure, the way we work encourages us to be blind to the struggles of others. And you're not going to make any progress if you're sitting in your HR bloody kingdom talking about how dumb everyone else is for not getting on board. Like, go and be them for a bit.
No one would do that, I'm sure. No. I think this is the thing, right? This is where the opportunity is that I get so excited about, though. Like, working in the HR space or the people culture space, I don't care what you call it in terms of how you...
Oh, you're not allowed to say HR anymore, right? It's like not a thing.
Well, and I do in the sense of purposefully, in terms of saying, reimagine HR, because I want us to reimagine where it is, right? And it starts a conversation around people going, you can't say HR, we're not resources. If you say I'm your greatest asset, then I want to punch you in the face. But true, right? Like, because it is a resource and it's been a numbers thing and there's a legacy attached to language. So it's not to be dismissive of it, but it's like, but it's fundamentally changing what you do that's important, not the labels.
Yeah.
And so the approach in terms of if you're moving to that people and culture space and you're talking to that space, where I get excited is we do work across every single area of a business.
Right. And you've got visibility.
So phenomenal. And I mean, and maybe it just depends how you're built, and I'm built this way and I get stupidly excited about it, but it's like, because I love learning new stuff. I love going and seeing what turbine machines being built over here and how cool that is that fits together, and, you know, be like, God, Bob, you've worked here for 30 years. What the hell? Talk me through it. What's kept you hanging in? You know, and you chat about retirement because he's just looking for his super. But there's always something else, right? And that's where the storytelling is. And I think we've got lost a bit in our development of strategy, in our drive for culture change, in how we relate to leaders, in all of it.
Yeah,
in fact,
100%.
The relationship bit, right?
Now, what you got right about your chat with your wind engineer is that you didn't say, here's why it's great to be a wind engineer. Here's a PowerPoint slide with 6 bullet points on it to enable you to see your piece of the puzzle. You said, this is cool. How did you do it? Now, I almost feel like this is so simple I shouldn't have to explain it, but let me do this. Right, here's change engagement 101. If you want to get people on a journey with you and you've got a new idea and you're like, actually, I do think this contributes and I think people will love it when they're like in it, but they don't get it yet. If that's you, you've got one of them, listen up. Here's how you do it. Step 1, when you send out your meeting invite for your launch or your discussion, do not, under any circumstances, name it the Agile Continuous Improvement People and Culture Revitalization Initiative Workshop. Do not do that. All right. You have to name it something like cool stuff to make your life easier, free Tim Tams, right? That's what you have to name it. It's got to be in someone else's language and immediately say what's in it for them, right? Now, if you're lucky and half the people that clicked yes turn up, when they walk in, you do not put your slides up and go, this is going to be good for you. I'm going to tell you why. Now, you can read them, but I'm also going to say them with my mouth. So listen, you do not do that. Instead of tell, and this is so easy, here's what you do. You ask. You say, what's making it hard for you guys to be awesome at the moment? Yeah. And then get this, they'll tell you. And then you go, yeah, right. So you want to make the boat go a bit faster and you want to be able to pick your own training and development instead of having it in the thing. Is that right? And they go, yeah. And you're like, why would that be good? Hear this? So saying it back, ask another question. Why would that be good? And they say to you, well, then I could feel like I really own the direction of my role. I just feel like it's more mine and people would actually listen to me. And you're like, yeah. So if you had more say in how things worked and you could see where your career was going, you'd enjoy your job better and you like it. And they're like, yeah. And you're like, cool, guess what? We're going to do that for you. Do you want to see the strategy? And then they go, yeah. And then you chat about it. And then get this, once you've chatted about it, which again is a conversation, not a lecture, you then go, how do you see this working for you? What do you need from us to make it happen? Question. And then they tell you, and then you give it to them. Yeah. It's really easy. And all you need is Tim Tams. You don't even need a projector.
Save on AV and use your AV budget on consumables.
Yeah. On board. And then just make it engaging and ask people questions instead of giving them a fucking lecture. And they'll be on board so fast because you've connected to their actual lives. You've given them space to think about how it works for them. And then you've made it easy for them.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to know anything. You know what's cool about that? You don't have to know about the strategy. You just have to ask good questions.
But a lot of the time, don't you find though that you do know what those answers are? Because a lot of the time people are tuned in and the strategy is not so off the mark. And that's why you can then say, well, this is why we're thinking, I think we've got you covered here. Because, but the problem is being able to show that you didn't develop it, right? It's that it's come from your people. It's come from, that place, because that's where ownership comes from. And
accuracy is a very poor goal. You can either have accuracy or you can have alignment. And I'll tell you which one gets results in a business, and it's not accuracy. I don't care if you know the right answer. Being right doesn't get things done. It's a very lonely space to live, being right all the time. So instead, if you focused on delivering things that people wanted, you get there. But the thing I always try to explain to people about strategy is I'm like, what you don't want is a strategy. If you give me 45 minutes and an internet connection and maybe a Canva account, I can give you a strategy that you will be genuinely blown away by. You'll be like, how does she know? You'll read the one pager and you'll be like, we are the innovative leaders at the front of agriculture. And we do value telling the truth and respecting our clients. Wow, how did she know? Perfect. She even knows right. That's easy. That bit, anyone can do that.
Yeah.
Well, not anyone, I'm underselling it, but anyone, that's not the thing. You know what the answers are, you know what pisses them off, and you know how to fix it, but that doesn't help you. What helps you is the connection to people, and taking them on a journey actually means having them sell themselves on it.
Yeah, because that's what builds, the how coming to life, right? That's
hang on.
And so I think that's absolutely at the core of it. And I know I'm just thinking of this client having a tough time right now is absolutely built to drive people change in the way that you describe.
Yeah.
But they're in an organization where that approach just doesn't fly. So they're not empowered to walk into a room and to be like, talk to me about how we can make your life easier so you can smashing it out of the park, right?
Like, what is HR if not that?
Yeah. And I think this is the challenge for a lot of my clients is that, and this is why the culture is that handbrake I call it the handbrake for effectiveness, right? It stops anything from working. That's cool. And it's kind of trying to work with them around how you kind of work through that. And it means that sometimes you've got additional stuff to do before you get to step into that room and have the conversation that you need to have in the way that you describe. But then it becomes soul destroying.
Here's a grenade though. What if you just did
it? Yes. So another client did that. They're in a new job now.
Is the new job better?
Yes. And so this is the thing, right? We have to, a lot of the time we talk about the fact that our organization's culture is avoidant or it's fear-based or it's a risk averse, right? I feel we have to step into our own power as change makers around how far we're prepared to go. Now, there's an element of risk you need to look at for that. I'm a sole income earner, I'm a single mum, or I'm I don't have the capacity to absorb any loss of salary, blah, blah, blah. There's lots of real life stuff that you have to factor in. So I'm not being dismissive of that, but it's like, if at your core, you want to work in a different way and make a difference, those are opportunities for you to get real-time feedback that place is never going to be the right place for you to thrive. And it's that conversation around survive, thrive. I don't want to survive.
And imagine that, okay, worst case scenario, you lose your job. So you go home and you're in alignment with your values, but you are worried about being broke. And so first of all, you're in a buyer's market with your skill set. Yeah. Right? So you get out there, seller's market. Anyway, employees market. So you get out there.
Employee market, yeah.
You've got a bunch of people that want to give you a job. And at the interview, they go, could you tell me what happened at your last place of employment? And you say, I was so passionate about connecting people to the strategy that instead of following the bureaucratic process, I went and connected with the staff and fed that back to leadership, but they didn't like it. So we weren't a good fit. I was happy to leave. And so the reason you left was because you cared about doing something in an awesome way. Who doesn't want to say that in a job interview? How much better is that actually as a story than I was really successful in my last role? You go, I cared so much and I wasn't prepared to have my values compromised and I made shit happen. You know what? I lost my job over it. Do you want me to work for you? And they will be like, yes, we do.
Yeah. And if they say no and reject you, and this is what I say to my coaching clients, it's like, it's a gift. Yeah. It is a gift for people to turn you away at an interview because your approach doesn't fit them. It's like, get out. If the culture fit's not right, but if it's not in alignment to how you want to work.
Yeah. How good to learn that so early.
Learn it before you go in, because it's hard when you're in, and then you're trying to find new information to figure out, is it me? Is it
and them? You knew too, didn't you? In the interview, you had the gut feel, you knew.
Yeah, squinty eyes was across the table, like you weren't vibing off the chick over there. And this is where it's about, when I bring woo-woo stuff into sides of my business and people are like, what's woo-woo? Like, it's like, because it's intuition stuff, right? Yeah. You've got to tap into the vibe. It's the vibe of it. It's the castle. It's, it is about trying to trust that. And I think if you lose it, any attempt, especially in the people strategy space, isn't going to stick. And people don't believe you. And so you're not believable.
let's be clear on vibes, Trina, because if you want the science for vibes are that your body has stored collective memory of cues and micro cues and situations that enable you to make good judgments around character and choices. And sometimes the logic of your brain of the professional persona you've created make it difficult for you to have that as a thought, because your brain's one part where you've got a whole neuron system that's got a memory in it, but your gut's another. So your gut's got a whole lot of stuff that's stored from experiences you've had. That it's not woo-woo shit. It's just information that you access on a different level that you find hard to do while you're being polite in a job interview.
I can't wait to share with you the next woo-woo event that I have run through the platform.
Yeah.
But it is, because it's about energy as well, right? It's energy out, energy in. And it's kind of like, so when you're having those conversations, like, you know, your change 101 example, and, you know, like there's a free flow of energy. When you're going in and you're presenting something, you've straight away got a barrier around the fact that you're sucking the energy out of the room for a start, because it's boring. But there's not engagement. And when there's no engagement, there's no energy. So
and honestly, you want to talk about alignment. If you are doing a job where the purpose of your job is to support other people to thrive, and you are not thriving or supported to thrive, there's no way you can help other people do that, because you're already out of alignment. It's not your fault, but it's just, it doesn't work. And people know. They just know. And the same way that the wellbeing email didn't land because the leader had no wellbeing, and the training company who cut their staff's learning and development budget didn't keep good people. You've got that at a personal level too, where if you're not thriving, there's no fucking way you can do that as an HR professional to help other people do it. So either like figure out what your delegations actually are, which are probably higher than you think, take a punt, have a stab and have a go, see what happens. 60% of the time, that's actually going to work out great. 40% of the time it's not, which is brilliant, because that's a piece of information about whether this place is for you or not. And then you move on. Great.
Because I've never seen a delegation that says who can have a conversation with someone.
Stop.
Although saying that, no, a client yesterday, actually, that is true.
Okay, so you've seen it once. Can you say that out loud again?
I've never seen a delegation that's written that says that you specifically can't have a conversation with someone. It's generally always built in governance. It's built in compliance. It's built in governance. It's built in arse covering. Delegations aren't built for relationship building. And they're certainly not built for nurturing them. They're certainly not built for maintaining them, fostering them.
This is some mic drop shit right here. When people are like, I can't run that workshop. And you're like, do your delegations expressly forbid conversation? Because I don't think they do. Mic drop. That is so good. I'm going to take
the room.
I'm going to take it somewhere else. It's going to come up in a workshop and I'm going to be like, you know, this Australian HR expert that I know, Trina Sunday, she once said, I've never seen a delegation except once that said you can't have a conversation.
Although
I want you to remember that. And they'll be like, whoa, it'll be great.
And when I say that one time, and just to contextualize, like in some work with a client yesterday, they showed me a relationship matrix.
Okay.
It literally, it's a bit scary. Like you start, your whole body starts to contract when you even start.
I tensed up a little bit, but I've got an open mind. Tell me how it works.
No, you don't want to open your mind. You just want to shut this shit down. But it's like, it's hierarchy across the top, essentially. External stakeholders down the left. And it's basically a green or red light, or whether you can talk to them or not. Not joking.
Okay. So don't tell me who this company is. But what I want you to do after this, just for fun, is to go on their website, and the bit where it says drop down our values and our mission, just click on that and see what it says. And I'm assuming it's going to say things like, we care about people here, we collaborate, or we're open, or we listen. It'll say something like that.
Yeah. So I'm inherently aware of what their values are, given some of the work I've done with them. And it's that whole, but it's where there's the mismatch, right? It's the mixed messaging. It's the, you know, saying that you want the organization to roll a certain way, and then the way you systematically build out any innovation, connection, or agility just is what thwarts kind of people being able to step into that space. So
God, honestly, and I reckon, I'm just thinking about this for HR, because one of the most common pieces of advice that I give a leadership team is like, how do we make strategic process? I'm like, just have a wee look in the mirror first and make sure that before you go out and tell your community or your customers or your staff that they have to behave a certain way, just need you to check that you're living and breathing that yourself. Otherwise it's not going to work. So, and usually we're not, because we're all hypocrites. We don't mean to be, but we just are. So you have to fix that up a bit before you go out. For HR, when you're putting together your people strategy or your L&D strategy or your OD plan, and you are frustrated by being unable to take people with you with a new way of thinking about how they work with people, I just want you to check really quickly when you've got your pillars or your principles or what you've said, and check you're doing that first. Because if you're not doing that, you cannot go tell someone else to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely kind of a sense check that needs to happen and hasn't been happening. And it's thwarting the strategy space in terms of being able to shift some of that, because I think because there is this busyness and heads down and churning out work and all that kind of stuff, that's not where strategy blossoms. That's not where the creative thing, it's not where inspiration lives.
It's bad conditions. Like if strategy's like bacteria, then it needs warmth to grow. No, is this not a good one? I'm going to shut this down.
No, because you've got to water your tree, I guess.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can go back to the tree. Yeah, we can
fertilize it down.
But it needs to be out in the sunlight, Trina. You can't work with what you can't see. So if you hide all these efforts away and you're like, and actually, let me take this extended metaphor. If you're like, I'm going to do my strategy, but I'm not ready to let anyone see it yet, wait till I've finished making it, and then you can have a look. You're doing it wrong. It needs sunlight in order to be able to grow. And to be able to find out all the ways it's wrong that you don't know about yet. And so I reckon if we were summing up, like today's chat, where we were like, okay, HR strategy, what a yarn. That all got really off topic and uncomfortable and lots of fun. What do I take from that? I reckon if you were watching this, here's what you'd take from it. You have to have a direction that you care about enough to change for, right? You've got to have a why that people actually care about in order to even think about getting anyone on board with strategy and change. You've got to know which path you're taking. It doesn't matter whether it's the right path. It's like, if you want to lose weight and you're like, should I do keto or Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers or go to the gym? Doesn't matter. What matters is you pick a path and stick to it. Like you'll get the result, but just know where you're going. And before you try and figure out anything transformational or with a multi-column table, check if you are lining up to deliver on that or if you're making it hard, right? Just check whether you're making it easy to get there or hard, and turn the mirror on yourself first. Before you try and come up with a new employee wellbeing program, just go, if we've said health first, are we living that? And are we making that easy or are we making that hard?
Well, that's the execution, right? Like a strategy is only as good as the execution. So if there isn't that lens put on it really early, then you're going out and then you're building a rod for your own back that you can't deliver on. And
well, strategy's not alive until it oxidizes with the real world.
Yeah.
It's just a piece of paper. And when you take your first step towards something, when you're like, you're pregnant for the first time and you're like, okay, this is in theory like a child living inside me. But then you like buy its first outfit and you're like, holy shit, there's going to be a person in this. This is amazing. Or you're like, I'm going to grow my business, blah, blah, blah. But then for us, our one's been, we're hiring new facilitators. And we've just started in the last week booking new jobs into the calendar of a person who is not yet hired. And so we're like, okay, this is real. Like we talked about this, but this person has a calendar and they've got work to do in June. So holy shit, we better make it real, right? Strategy's like that too. It doesn't need to be a big unveiling. Just take the first step toward making it real, and then you can believe it. You can grab it, you can touch it, but you got to let it oxidize.
Yeah. And I think that's where the change 101 stuff fits in, right? Like I think the days, and especially in the people strategy space, especially, but I think it's consistent everywhere. It's that you need this groundswell, you need a change movement that comes from where it matters the most. And that's where the bulk of your people is, not a top down.
If nobody cares, are you sure it's right? If you can't convince anyone, it's probably wrong, mate.
Yeah. But this is where I think there's a tension around how we misunderstand what we have to put into a strategy because we think that's what needs to be in the strategy for it to get approved.
Yeah.
And I feel like we get lost in that a little bit. So I think if the strategy is what we care about, how we're going to do it and how we're going to make cool things happen, it's outside of the strategy document where the conversations happen around, but we know that there's going to be 5, if we've got engagement, there's 5 times the productivity that's going to come from this space. This might translate to this profit, but it's audience driven, right?
Oh, I just realized I haven't made a really important point because I always forget that it's a thing that people don't know. Strategy's not an output, it's a process.
Yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to make that real clear in case anyone's like, oh, strategy, you mean the thing I made? No, that bit's right. Strategy's not an output, it's a conversation.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's
just to be very clear with everybody, right? It's not a deliverable. It's not collateral. It's a conversation. That's what strategy is.
And that's why
I back and forth in it.
Yeah. And that's where really a lot of HR strategy, for example, is a HR plan, because it's not, like that's what it is in reality. Like it's a document. The output is actually the plan. It's reviewed once a year and it's measured against some metrics. That's not strategy. No. And that's why
that is a creation, but it's not a conversation. And that's what strategy is.
And I think that it's trying to find where it sits in the middle, right? It's trying to look at how you can set the right conditions for having really great conversations that are going to inform strategy, adopt strategy, and smash strategy. And I think that it's about really knowing as well, from my perspective, like, don't focus on the change resistors, all those people that hate on you, or that, like, find all the people that believe, that are believing in the majority of the storytelling, because that's where the change support's going to come from. Like,
yeah,
that's where strategy is going to come to life.
I've got a bit of a bias on this one because I get to do this because I'm a self-employed person, and so I don't have to eat lunch with anyone on a regular basis. But like, my goal is always to have like raving fans, and like very cynical detractors. And I'm not too panicked about the bit in the middle. Like, if you start off aiming for like mass agreement, like, what a mediocre goal. You're just basically aiming to just be nothing. Like, wouldn't you rather have like 8 raving fans in your business who are like, holy shit, I can't wait to tell my teams about this, and everyone else cynical, than people just be like, oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely kind of where it sits, right? Like, and I think, I could talk about this all day.
I know. You're not allowed. You've only got 4 minutes and 20 minutes.
I've just looked at the clock, and it's like, and question I had come through was around, like, how do you make strategy? How do you make your strategy future proof?
Oh, you can't.
And I think this is, and it's because of, and the context was around the scale of change that's facing.
Yeah. I actually have a tip for this. Shah, could you grab my flip chart, please? This one's actually really simple. So you know how I said there's the why and the how and the what?
Yeah.
Basically what happens is the why doesn't change very often. Like, the why only changes, you usually just have to find it. Changes like every 10 or 20 years. Yeah. Thank you, Shah. Do I have a pen? Quick, get me a pen. I'm going to show these people Strategy 101 and explain how you future-proof a strategy. It's actually real basic. Sorry, I should have grabbed this before. Thank you, Shah. Okay, that was my handy assistant. All right, so strategy, 3 bits: why, how, and what.
Yeah.
The why, really long-term, big visionary goal, shouldn't be able to achieve it, very aspirational. Like, you should read it and go, how the fuck are we going to do that? Right? Yeah. This bit, don't change this bit. You might have to reconnect to what it is, but you shouldn't change it. The how, that's our like approach, priorities, principles, that sort of stuff. This one usually changes every 1 to 3 years, or if you've got a significant external shock. So you should review this one as part of a regular basis, right? Or if something really massive happens, that's worth reconsidering. So we had a really clear how about how we were delivering workshops until COVID hit, and then we switched it to virtual first because it was a big external shock, right? And that's lots of people. And then your what is budgets, plans, projects, money you spend, people you hire, stuff you do. So aspirational, intentional, operational. Yeah. Your what should change every bloody day. And so if your strategy is a budget or an action plan, it should change as soon as you get into work, right? Because then you're like, oh, it's not going to cost that. Oh, it's going to take twice as long. Oh, that person left. That's not a strategic issue. It's an operational issue. And that doesn't matter. That should change every day. That's how it works. Otherwise, you're not responding. But the how bit about future proofing, just be so fucking clear on where you want to go and what matters, and make it so big you can't even imagine achieving it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And then change this bit now and again, because you just have to change tack sometimes. It doesn't change what you care about or what your values are.
Yeah.
And you need to.
Yeah. And I think that's a massive takeaway, right? Like, I think it is about shifting mindset away from strategy being this thing we create and then we've done it. It is this daily kind of lived and breathed, and it becomes a part of the employee experience. It becomes part of how we show up in terms of what what we do and how we have to connect with all parts of the organization if we want to smash it collectively. So I think if there's anyone that's got questions that they haven't hit us up with, because we've run out of time, you will be able to watch this on demand, or if you are watching it on demand and haven't had a chance to ask us any questions, hit us up, ask some questions. Alicia and I will have a chat, and we might come back with some food for thought, which everyone will be able to see on the live stream page. We'll send you some links to that probably tomorrow once the recording's up. But thank you, Alicia, for joining us at what is like now, 6 p.m. your time?
Oh, it's 5. And you know what they call that? Pub o'clock.
Pub o'clock. Yeah. Enjoy.
Yeah. I'm off to
thanks. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time, and watch out for what events are coming up. Take care.